As the flicker goes across the screen, it tells us that the StreamYard, who are the software platform we use for Consultervation, is live. We are back with the latest episode asking the question, is your leadership reality or illusion? I'm here with Kevin Turnbull, who's the, of course, Vice President of RLC Consult, our advisory training program in the US, and President of RLC LA, and the fantastic Mr. Ever Reliable Eric Swick from Swick Business Strategies. If your strategies needs a lift, you better talk to Eric. So, chaps, great to have you back again.
It's good to be here.
I have to say, in the last couple of episodes, Eric, you've done 2 shows. You've been fabulous, by the way.
Thank you.
And you've done a really polished job.
Well, I appreciate that. I've had good mentoring. Well,
you have to introduce us to them, Kevin. Isn't that right?
You just got in before me there, Dave.
So let's just have a think about, why would we ask the question, is your leadership reality or illusion? What do you think that means as a question to you?
Kevin, you want to go first?
Yeah, to me, it's leadership should not be contrived, and it shouldn't happen by chance. Leadership should be something that is worked at, and individual leaders have to present themselves in a very specific way for leadership to be reality. I've worked in a lot of companies where I've worked for people who just couldn't spell leadership. Never mind demonstrated. But they were full of illusion or delusion. I don't know. That they've been promoted, so therefore they must be a good leader. And actually, the opposite was true. So this is a really important subject.
Yeah, you make me laugh, Kevin, with some of your things you say. But when I think about this, I think about how leadership has to really change. It's had to change this year specifically with COVID, or last year, 2020. And I think it's just been evolving, and I think it continues to evolve. I think where your reality or illusion can be is if you look back at historical ways of leading people. And if that's what you think is being a good leader, I don't think that's going to be relevant going forward.
I totally agree, Eric. I think it is. But I want to delve just a step below that. If your leadership is an illusion and you're not dealing with reality, what kind of problems might that kick up?
Well, you're going to get people problems all the time, because you're not being authentic and you're not leading. And the first casualty is always people. Motivation, focus, productivity. Very important in the accounting world. All of these things. So if you're leading by plodding along, it is an illusion. But I do think, Eric, you made a really good point about COVID. We've all got clients that we talk to a lot. And I do think that COVID has brought out more leadership qualities in the people, in my clients. They might have to be pushed along a little bit, but they've had to face the reality of a COVID world in their business, and it's just something that they couldn't ignore.
Yeah, I just know from my background, I was one of those people that managed by walking around and just sitting in people's offices and having conversation and talking and see where I can help them. That's not as easy to do when you're remote and you're not as easily accessible. So it's more has to be planned. But that's fine. It's just as a change. It's just a different approach. And that's what I was meaning when I said that.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time since I've heard MBWA. I first heard that on a Dixon's Group, a UK retailer, retail management development program far too many years ago at a hotel next to the Forth Road Bridge in Edinburgh. And I remember hearing it back then. And there's 2 things I remember from that course. That was one of them, Eric. This whole idea of just walk around and talk to your people, right? Yeah. And then the other one that I remember was the first job of a leader is to hire their replacement. Yeah. And I thought, that's a bit easy. Of course, that's not what they meant.
Yeah. Yeah. What I think about when you talk about illusion, I think about our conversation last week when we brought up things like George talked about companies having the slogan, our customers are our most valued asset, but then, I sit on the phone for an hour waiting for customer service. It's that kind of thing where you've got your values don't match up with your behaviors. And it's, what we talk about as that first principle is, what you say and you preach, basically you should be living that and prove, demonstrating that to the rest of the organization as a leader. And I don't think that always happens. And I think that's where, the illusion part comes into play.
Do you think illusion wastes time?
I think it's not a productive way to lead if you have, if you're trying to put a front up, but you don't really believe in that, and that's not who you really are. I think that is not an efficient way to lead.
That's right. I think that's almost a self-answering question, Dave, because if you're leading by illusion, you think you're leading, but you're not, and therefore you must be wasting your time.
Yes, it's more an act of delusion, isn't it? Where the distortion is so big you don't even know you're doing it. I think there's an illusion sometimes, I think, where time drifts past. And have you ever found yourself in that problem situation where maybe there's someone you've got to deal with, and you go into your week and you're really adamant this is the week you're going to break the back of this thing, and suddenly it's Tuesday, before you know it, it's Wednesday, and you start talking about, well, I think I'm going to have to do this next week. Anyone ever done?
Yeah, but I think there's psychology underneath that, and because I've chosen slightly the wrong thing to do, and I'm not sure about completing the task because maybe strategically it's not right, or breaking up teams and rebuilding them, or whatever it was. If I delay, I'm usually procrastinating for a reason, which isn't laziness. It's there's a self-doubt involved there. And actually, that's a sign of good leadership, that you can face up to, well, maybe that wasn't right. Maybe I should be rethinking this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. But I also think it's a bit like a coin, Kevin. There's two sides to a coin, isn't there? You're telling me they're really using your head version, which is the good version. The bad version is where you drift and put it off.
Yeah.
And then the following week, you repeat the cycle. And before you know it, 3 weeks go by. You're in the third week attempting to address something. And worst case, you're in another calendar month. And something that was a problem last month hasn't even been started. And it's as ripe as it was before, within, of course, today's context, the illusion.
Yeah. I've always had a principle there, Dave, where if I start having those kinds of thoughts, I think about a previous situation that I dealt with. And I always have this, you always have that great feeling afterwards when you've addressed a problem, right? Because at least it's out in the open and it's been addressed. And so I always go back and try to remember a period like that, which then motivates me to, let's address it. Let's do it now, not try to procrastinate.
A few weeks ago, Debbie and I were very lucky to run a program that involved going around the country clubs at the club company. And one of the general managers, I really should have remembered his name today, told me a story about his ultra marathons that he does, and how he's done some in the regions of David Goggins. And if you're listening today and you haven't heard of David Goggins, find him online. He does ultra marathons of extreme challenges. He's also the current, I think, Guinness World Record holder or something for the most chin-ups ever done. And that's a very big number. I think it was 4,000 and something.
Wow.
Wow, absolutely.
Wow.
Now, it's a big number. Now, this chap was telling me about the bit we had in common was in extreme endurance events. There's a moment in time where the illusion plays to your favor because all that's left is reality. And in that reality, all you can think about is the single moment you're in. And to simplify for anyone who's not into this kind of thing, it's just the next turn of the wheel or the next step you're taking is all you think about in your reality of that exact second in time. It's quite puristic. It's quite addictive because you remove everything. You don't think about tomorrow. You don't think about people. You think about functioning. right?
Yeah.
So, and often the next 5 seconds. So that's a good reality. But what else can you find in a business reality? So if you choose to be in the moment in a business reality, what are some of the things you think we might notice more of? Any ideas?
I think there's an interesting spin on leadership here, Dave. I think if you're in the moment in a business, that to me usually means that you're focusing in on the operational side of it.
Yeah.
You know, you're looking at the nuts and bolts, the cogs, the way they turn. So you're in the business, looking down and in, and that's good because you need to be on top of the detail. But you're missing the other key part, which is the looking out and up part, which is where is the business going? You know, what is the marketplace doing? The strategic side of it all. Do I know what my destination is and the journey to get there?
Yeah, it's a good shout. And it's a very good point, Eric. Sorry, Kevin. It's called
Yeah.
Eric.
And I think
Call me Eric, I don't mind. Yeah, we're interchangeable now.
We're twins from another mother.
And it was revealed here on Consultervation.
I was going to say something and now I lost my thought.
That's all right. I think there's a special place, and I bet you it's close to this idea. So I think it's good to reflect on the in versus on about being in reality and knowing when to step up and on to tomorrow, Kevin, working on the strategic stuff. But there's also realizing that your people might be in the reality. So if you put the people hat on, can you be in the moment with your people? Can you be in the moment and notice, listening, hearing, doing, considering what it is they're going through, as well as being in that reality? So we put a blog out about this, I think about 7 or 8 days ago. Debbie put the chapter up from the book and made a few amendments for me, which is fabulous by Debbie. And there are 20 tips you can take from the blog, 20 about building your leadership as a result of answering this question. Is your leadership reality or illusion? I've got the top 5 for us to look at, and I want us to focus on number 4 when we get to it. So let's have a look at the number 1, leadership reality.
Yeah.
I mean, how good are people at being one of these? Really?
Well, you know, I sometimes question whether being a role model is really the right words or the right thing for a leader to be doing, because I don't necessarily want everyone to be doing what I'm doing. I expect them to do, you know, for instance, we often talk about people being in a mode of self-leadership. I'd rather them take initiative. I'd rather see them, you know, come with ideas and how we can do things better and differently, not necessarily, you know, model me.
So I agree with that. I'm sorry, Dave. I'd add that to that because you struck a nerve with me. That I think leadership, you know, through different levels of the company, is a complete illusion. You know, you take a new recruit on, and the typical leader says, "I hope they are good leaders," and don't do anything about it. It's illusionary. But the reality would be, I wonder if they understand leadership and teaching leadership. You know, I remember many moons ago, I joined Ford Motor Company in the UK as a graduate trainee in the marketing department, and you just kind of chucked in. And I'm sure it's just the same now. You weren't kind of encouraged to show, you know, to develop your leadership skill or your style. Because I think leadership is a funny word because it's about leading, you know, and you think leading people, but actually it doesn't have to be that. It can be leading yourself. It can be leading processes. That's all involved leadership. And I think, you know, corporate America, corporate Europe misses a big trick by not developing leadership skills at a much earlier stage in people's career.
I would go a step further, Kevin, and say that as we move into number 2, that skill becoming a reflex. So your natural reflex becoming a skill choice is the future of leadership improvement. When you get rid of your normal reflex, anything that's natural to you that sometimes is not the best choice, and you become so good at choosing the right skill, you transform your leadership. And I agree with you, taught much earlier in the leadership development life cycle. Quick additional point, Kev. You know that first one? I think this is all about values and behaviors. If it's one thing and one thing only, if you say you are something, for goodness sake, be it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I take Eric's point on the role model thing, that everyone does different jobs, but I think you know, the whole language of leadership, this is where role model comes in. The way that a leader, you know, somebody at the top of a company in a leadership team, the way they behave and they talk and they walk, I mean, that is your fertile ground to be a role model, to impress younger people that, you know, this is not contrived, but this is what leadership is. This is what leadership does, more to the point.
I think it's a great message, and actually, in order to put that into action, Kev, you also need to have the knowledge you need, don't you? So, but there's a recognition to this point though that says, do you know what knowledge you don't know, or do you even know you don't know?
I think when I go back to my early thought days, I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't know what I didn't know. I needed somebody to provide a leadership to my leadership.
Yeah.
I remember as a area manager, very young area manager, I remember going to this place. I'd driven miles to get there, and it was an absolute state of a place, and I couldn't believe it. And I stood outside, and I put this into action. I called up a seasoned veteran, and I rung this guy up. David Abercrombie was his name. I said, David, I've made this drive all the way to the south coast of England, and I've got here, and it's the worst store I've seen in my patch. And I remember saying to David, I want to go in and kill the manager. You know, great old-fashioned leadership. I was angry about it. The someone didn't care enough that it was this bad. And he said to me, no, Dave, what I suggest you do, get back in your car, and as you leave, let them know that you've arrived and decided it wasn't fit for you to visit, and that someone is coming to do an audit immediately this morning to check the standards in the whole operation. And he said, send your senior manager. And it was I didn't know that's what you were supposed to do. How lucky was I to work with him that he knew? No, step back, apply resource, make a better decision.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I think
your natural instinct was to go in and shout at them. Is that right, Dave?
No, that's right. Retail baton in my hand. What's going on here then? Sorry. You just sometimes you get caught in that moment, can't you? Going, this is not the brand. What's going on? And I was so lucky that I was able to call somebody to help me. And sometimes we got to know who that is.
Yeah.
What type of person could you call, Kevin and Eric?
What do you mean, what type of person?
What profession might you bring up?
Huh?
What profession might you call up in a moment of need like that?
Bouncers.
Kevin, bouncers. I was thinking more of maybe an RLC coach.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I think it's know who you can call. You know, that isn't gonna listen to you ring in and go, "Why? What's wrong with Dave?" or "What's wrong with Eric?" They're gonna go, "Oh, okay," and they're gonna listen and ask you to coach yourself.
Yeah. I like this, have the knowledge you need, because it's just being aware that you don't know everything.
Correct.
And that you're willing to seek out advice or at least talk to others to get their opinion. It doesn't mean that your perspective isn't right and your decision isn't right, but I think that's how you gain knowledge, is by talking to others and getting other perspectives.
That's exactly.
And also, I think there's a strong element of you don't know what you can do until you do it. So yes, talking to people and all that sort of stuff, but I've had many a coaching client who have been unsure of themselves and unsure how good they are. And when you get through that, to give them the knowledge that they really do need, they blossom. It's astonishing.
And it gives them a chance, doesn't it, to implement the plan. Now, I think we have a leadership problem in the world today. There's lots of leadership deficit at RLC. We talk about that regularly. But I think there's a implementation pandemic around the world in business today, an inability to execute.
Yeah.
What do you think, chaps? Am I barking up the wrong tree? Is that the right phrase?
Well, I think it's a double whammy, Dave. I think you're totally right, 100%, 110% right. The implementation is an issue, but also the leadership plan. I don't see that very often. Never mind the implementation of it.
Yeah, just having a plan to implement. Yeah. I just think that people, I think I said this last week, they just get caught up in the day-to-day and they don't really dedicate time to thinking through this type of work, developing a leadership plan, putting something in place and then implementing it.
Yeah, it's actually doing the job and moving it on even by 1 degree. Because there's the fourth item on my list is make timely decisions. I was listening to a chap called Richard Calvert, CEO of the club company, say to his people that the biggest mistake a business owner can make is to make no decisions.
Mm.
And we're not talking about making loads of decisions. We're talking about making timely decisions, which is the context of that is your business and industry, isn't it? It's not a rule for everybody. How have you managed to make timely decisions in your careers so far, Eric and Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the decision. Like if I'm going to go out and do an acquisition, that's a very different decision than, should I buy this new piece of equipment for the office that's going to help my employees? I mean, those are the kind of things. So I feel like, making timely decisions is important. I'm an analytical guy, I'm a CPA, that's my background. So I want to have some facts first before I make a decision, because what I find is if you just do it by the seat of your pants, there can be damage done. And so I think at least taking some time to think it through, but I think it depends on the decision you're making and how big it is. But I do agree. You can do analysis paralysis where you never make any decisions because you got to overanalyze it. But I think making it timely, you got to evaluate what's the worst thing that can happen. That's kind of how I look at it. And if it's immaterial, then I move forward. Right.
I think, Dave, I think this is one of the number one reasons for executives to have a coach. Because I'm sure it's the same with your clients and yours, Eric, that people will prevaricate, they will overanalyze, and the coach holds them accountable to the decision-making process. It just, it seems, I think many executives think they can just do it all, but actually some of them are good and some of them are not so good. And I think timely decision-making is particularly important with people. If you've got a bad apple in the barrel, that's a decision you've got to do quickly, because they might not be doing a very good job individually, but they sure as hell are affecting the morale of the team by being allowed to get away with stuff. Because the leader isn't leading, doing something about the issues, and I think that's where timely decisions are really important.
It's a great point, and Jim Collins says, hire slowly, fire fast. I was like Kevin Temple.
No, my rule number one in HR is if in doubt, chuck them out.
And there's a brand new.
It's worked for me for many a long decade.
Yeah, there's a new podcast coming out soon. Kevin Temple does HR. So. Let's talk about number 5, and I think we can spend a long time on this, but let's talk about the importance of this, because this one's got a bit of illusion in it, looking after your people. It doesn't sound like it means what it says on the surface. It's about doing the right things with your people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a deeper depth to this. What does knowing your people look like, though?
Well, to me, knowing your people is, I really feel that there's so many factors that influence performance, right? And some of them can be in the workplace, but some of them can be outside the workplace. And just, having employees that know that you care and that they can come and talk to you about that, that's what's important, I think. And then knowing how you can help them through those. Because, I think if they're happy and life is, going in a good path, they'll be successful and productive for you. And in my mind, that's part of looking after them, just making sure that, everything's good. It's that, conversation that we have often now about work-life balance. And it's just making sure that, you're keeping that balance for them and understanding where they're at in that spectrum.
Definitely.
Right. How does this work in a larger company? Where know your people kind of suggests that you know them personally, and that's Tom and that's Dick and that's Harry. But I ran a division of a company and I had 1,500 people working for me, and there's no way that I would learn them as individuals. So how do you overcome that?
But did you have 15 direct reports?
I had 6 direct reports.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, that would be the focus. And I would encourage them to know their people. And if there's a problem, they can communicate that with you and get your feedback or input. But my expectation here is that, I wouldn't expect you to know 1,500 people as well as you would at least the 6 people that you deal with directly on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah,
That's
I did, with 1,500 people, it is burdensome from a relationship point of view. But I had my 6 general managers, and when a new director came on board, they always felt a bit vulnerable. Were they doing this stuff right? But actually, I focused on with another level of management called contract managers, who ran the individual site contracts. It was in manpower services, so this was security officers were the product. So I spent a lot of time evaluating the effectiveness and leadership of those 60 contract managers, and I fired half of them because they just weren't up to snuff. And I could get to the quality of my general manager later, but the contract managers were directly involved with both the client and our security officers. And and my priority was, I want my people to know I'm on their side. So I'm not standing for poor slipshod management techniques. So I got rid of half of them. And then I got rid of half the general managers. But, that's another story.
But I think both, there's a Jack Welch talked about paradoxical leadership, where you have to do both big decisions today and big decisions tomorrow at the same time. And that might be letting go thousands of people's job roles, but still building a new factory format that's fit for the future. You got to do both those activities, and they never seem fair, right, to the person who's being let go. But my answer to the question past Eric's, Kevin, is you've got to learn to build deep rapport with the right people in your organization. And whether that's done massively through shared experiences, or if you're a leader of a team, you really understand beyond surface-led questions. And a surface-led question is, no, my dog is called Monty. That's surface. Depth is knowing what I want out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Depth is being able to ask me, and I'm willing to tell you, right? Because you could ask me that question, and I could sit there and go, I'm not telling you, Kevin. What's that got to do with you? So
depth is also knowing what Monty wants out of life.
Totally, yeah. Although I have to tell you, I don't think there's very much he does want. I think it's more that I'd like to have Monty's life. But it's building that deep rapport with people beyond shallow rapport building stuff, normal stuff, and it's you know, if you're coaching somebody and they tell you they want to make so much money in the next 2 years in their life, and I'm deliberately sticking to money for a moment, an elementary coaching skill is to associate that to meaning. Well, what for? Where? What part of your life? What's that going to actually do? Why do you say that number?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether the person realizes, oh, the number's not big enough, or the dream isn't big enough, or they've never thought about that before. It's the same in leadership. Why does one of your team want that? And what is it trying to enable in their life? If you can get to that level of deep rapport, you can do what Zig Ziglar said. Help people achieve their dreams, they'll help you achieve yours. And that's what this is all about, getting to know your people. And actually, in an operational role, like you highlighted, Kevin, it's one of the only ways to check back the quality of the work being done, where you can find out, are they fit? And should you change your structure? Should you get rid of those that no longer fit the business model correctly? Because it's both, isn't it?
Yeah. It is definitely, and that's why you've got to allocate time to both,
Totally,
in a deliberate way.
Yeah.
I cut my day into segments through the week, and I tried in order to some strategic planning, some social media, a lot of coaching, working with people and teams, and I do it deliberately because it suits my temperament to have it more planned out instead of doing it by chance.
Yeah.
I like it. Go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just going to say, I agree totally with what Kevin just said, and that if anything, that should be the majority of your time as a leader on your calendar, right? It shouldn't be doing work. It should be doing those things that help elevate the organization and help people move forward. I think that's a better use of your time. I'm working with a client right now where he's so involved in the sales effort for the organization, and what I've gotten him convinced is that they need to add someone in that area so that he can lead, because he's good at it. I think he'll be really good at it with some of the work that we've done. So
yeah, I mean, I like to with my clients, once they've grasped what they're trying to do with leadership, I encourage them all the time to think about their brand and actually put it in the diary. Friday afternoon, have a personal brand session with yourself or involve other people. Ask honest questions like, well, what shadow am I casting internally to my people and externally to my clients? Is it a good shadow? Is it full of positive things that are going to motivate the team and retain my customers because we're doing a first-class job? Now, that could be an hour on Friday afternoon or Monday morning or whatever, but it's deliberate.
Yeah.
And that to me is leading leadership.
I like that whole idea of leading leadership, Kevin, and it's a great example that comes with point 14. So if you're watching this, you've gone from point 5 to 14. There are 20 of these points on the RLC Global blog. Is your leadership reality or an illusion? But it's been quite common for people to give Fridays, like you said, in large corporates here in the UK, half day on a Friday for meaningfulness, mindfulness, stop, reflect about your week. And do you know what the common flaw with that plan is? They haven't stopped the operational flow. So you can go and take half a day, Eric, but all the stuff that normally happens every other day of the week is switched on. So what happens is your email box starts to bulge and your phone doesn't stop ringing. And what would somebody in that structure do? They answer the phone because it's habit and they care. So that's a problem to being much better at an idea, but you got to think the idea through and solve them. And that's why I brought this up, is that when we start talking about reality or illusion, it's going to throw problems up. And it's up to the leadership group to solve them and to work them through. And before I ask these two wonderful gentlemen for a final comment on reality or illusion, I want to remind some of our listeners that we have been speaking about people care in 2021 since January on Consultervation in some shape or form or another. And I believe, it's my personal belief, Eric and Kevin, you can concur or disagree, you're welcome to do either, that the days of swapping time for attendance in the workplace, those days are over. I'm really sorry to anyone listening. They're over. And if you're still enforcing them, recruitment is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Other two ingredients that I think have changed, we've got to get good at courageous conversations about how someone is actually doing. And number three, we've got to care for them. So you've got to do it all. So you've got to learn the skills to care better, even if you don't feel like it. You've got to learn the skills to be more courageous and say, hey, Eric, this is how you're actually doing. And use the appropriate skills or words to do so. And in addition to that, we've got to stop expecting attendance in exchange for time and money. And we've got to start talking about production and efficiency and great work done wherever it is possible to do that work. It's a different world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the world has changed. I still have a question mark over whether it's permanent change, and I think it's likely that it is. But I've talked to quite a few people who see it as a bit of a, I think this is a 3-year wonder. 3 years' time, we'll have kind of forgotten the pandemic. Like 3 years after 9/11, it's a kind of residual, well, that was shocking, but it was then, and this is now. So, you wonder that controlling instincts won't come back again. That leaders of, the companies that have said, oh, no, we're into flexible working and you can stay from home. I wonder if they're going to say in 3 years' time, actually, we may not want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I actually read a survey that was done, and the workforce is saying they want that flexibility. That's number one on their list when they interviewed people in their work environment. What is the most important thing to you? And it came up flexibility. So I think it's going to be a reality going forward. You mentioned 9/11. I mean, prior to 9/11, you could walk into an airport and you didn't have to go through any kind of metal detectors and security and all of that. And, that stayed with us. And so I think there will be some things that will stay with us, even when it comes to leadership and how we work with people. But yes, I don't think that it applies to all industries. And, we keep talking about leadership more in like a formal office type environment, but the reality is that's not the case in certain industries where the physical presence has to be at the place of work, whether it's a restaurant or movie theater or, anything like that, where the consumer is coming to you. That's going to be a very different environment for them. And they're going to, I envision there'll still be changes that will be in place, whether it's just sanitary things that we're doing differently than we've done in the past. I know that I will not touch those railings on an escalator ever again. I mean, I'm just going to make sure I have good balance and be able to go down the escalator without holding on. It's things like that I think will change. It's there. It's going to be permanent.
Good. And thank you, chaps, for some great contributions to another fabulous conversation this week on Consultervations. In the next 2 weeks, Kevin is going to take us through leadership language, or the language of leadership, aren't you? And Eric's also going to be back with a secret subject he won't even tell me about yet, to take us through another extravaganza as we keep making this varied and changing it up quite regularly. We have a format change in a few episodes' time to get excited about too, that I'm really excited to reveal, actually, not to unreveal. That means I'm closing it back up. But in the meantime, we've been asking you, is your leadership reality or illusion? One thing is for sure, that working in a reality of leadership is going to be much more effective to you than ignoring your illusion. Mm-hmm. Equally, if your people can't believe that it's possible to go somewhere they've never been before, illusion may also be, as Kevin said at the beginning, a really good word to spark the imagination into what is possible. Like anything with words, they can be both good and bad. Join us next time round. Thank you, gents, for your time.
Been a pleasure.
It's been great, Dave.
On the next episode of Consultervation.